You ever been treated like a criminal for fishing? Not overfishing, not trespassing, just sitting on your own dock, rod in hand, minding your business. I have. And if you're thinking it was some game warden in a ranger hat pulling up in a boat, you'd be wrong. It was 3 HOA board members in a golf cart. Yep, 3 people with laminated name tags, fake authority, and the kind of energy you'd expect from mall cops with nothing left to patrol. They came barreling down the gravel path like they were responding to a hostage situation. But the only thing I was holding hostage was a half-drunk cup of gas station coffee and a bobber that hadn't moved in 30 minutes. The leader of this operation? Glenda Farrow, bleach blonde wraparound sunglasses and a clipboard gripped tighter than her HOA bylaws. She pointed at me like I was cooking meth. "Sir, you are in violation of HOA Code 4C1, she announced. Unauthorized recreational angling. I blinked. I genuinely thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. I know y'all got HOA stories too. And if you love these true feelin' twist-loaded tales with a side of justice and a whole lot of clipboard chaos, hit that subscribe button like you're slapping a citation back at Karen. Tomorrow's story? Even wilder. And trust me, what's coming next? You're gonna want a front row seat for it. Now, I've lived in this lakeside cabin for 10 years. Paid for it in full, took care of the dock with my own hands. My dad's tackle box still sits under the same folding chair I've used since I retired. For me, fishing isn't a sport. It's meditation with bait. The lake's always been a kind of unspoken church. Quiet water, slow mornings, no sermons, just ripples and frogs. Glenda didn't care. She slapped a bright yellow citation right against my chest. $600 for violating an HOA fishing ordinance I'd never heard of. And the kicker? She told me the lake was community property now, and that any fishing required a permit issued by the board for wildlife preservation. I just stared at her. Lady, the only wildlife in this lake are 3 ducks, 2 frogs, and a catfish that swims in circles. But again, not a joke. She sniffed like I'd insulted her kingdom and stepped back as if I was going to cast my line at her face. That's when I realized something important. These people weren't just annoying. They were dangerous in that very specific way power-drunk volunteers become when someone hands them a clipboard and no oversight. I wasn't mad, yet. I was intrigued. I mean, if you're going to fine me on a Sunday morning for doing something I've done for a decade on a dock I've maintained, behind a cabin I own, well, I want to know what rock you crawled out from and what paper you think gives you the right. So when I got back inside, I poured myself another cup of coffee and found a bright orange warning taped to my door. HOA violation, escalating fines, legal action, suspension of community privileges. I had to laugh. I didn't even use the pool or the gym. The lake was all I cared about. So I did what anyone in my position would do. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew wouldn't panic. Elliot? Elliot Ramos isn't just my old college roommate. He's a corporate attorney who helped me set up my publishing business years ago. Knows the law like I know my tackle box. Every nook, every latch. When he answered, he said, "If this is about the time I told your ex she could keep the dog, I'm still not sorry." I said, "Not that. I need you to look up something for me. The lake, behind my house. I need to know who actually owns it." There was a pause on the line, a long one. Then he asked, "You thinking lawsuit?" I said, "Not exactly. I'm thinking checkbook. Because here's the thing. I've dealt with difficult people, lived through tight deadlines, bad bosses, divorce, a colonoscopy without anesthesia. But this was personal. This was Glenda and her clipboard army deciding I wasn't good enough for my own dock. And the moment she handed me that fine, she started a war she didn't even know she... What they didn't realize was I'm the kind of man who doesn't fight loud, I fight long. While they were busy printing parking passes and drafting kayak dress codes, I was about to make a move so quiet, so surgical, they wouldn't see it coming until the signs went up and the deed was done, literally. Because if there's one thing HOA queens like Glenda never question, It's their own paperwork. They assume control is, but ownership is something else entirely, and I was about to show them the difference. You ever have that moment when someone threatens you and instead of blowing up, you just get real quiet and start flipping through legal files? That was me, standing in my living room with an orange HOA violation flapping in the breeze from my ceiling fan. They wanted to fine me $600 for fishing. I didn't throw the notice away out of anger. I did it out of curiosity. Because when people start acting like royalty, it's usually because no one's bothered to check the crown jewels. Elliot Ramos answered on the second ring. Ben, if this is about that time I told your ex she could keep the dog, I already apologized. Not about the dog, Elliot. I need you to look into a lake. He went quiet. I could practically hear him switch screens. Elliot's the kind of lawyer who once beat a zoning case using a receipt from Home Depot and a monologue about drainage slope. That's why I trust him. He doesn't react, he calculates. I told him about Glenda's golf cart SWAT team, the citation, the wildlife violation for harassing a limp catfish. They say the lake's community property, I said. I want to know who actually owns it. That's all I asked. No revenge, no lawsuits, just truth, because truth, when timed right, is more explosive than a lawsuit. And a lot cheaper. 3 days later, Elliot called. You sitting down? I'm always sitting when I'm right, I said. He chuckled. Okay. According to county records, the HOA never bought the lake, never leased it properly either. It was part of a development plan from '91 that was supposed to be finalized, but wasn't. They've been managing it like squatters with a rule book. I blinked. So, who owns it? He paused. Zona Valley Holdings, or what's left of it. They folded in 2003, but their assets, like your lake, never got properly transferred. It's a legal orphan. I stood in my kitchen like someone had told me I owned the moon. So it's up for grabs. Basically, like a rusty boat that nobody's claimed. Still floating, still real, just waiting on a new name. That's when I felt the shift. See, this wasn't just about fish anymore, it was about principle. Glenda had built her little empire on paperwork assumptions, and nobody had bothered to flip the page. Well, I was about to rewrite the whole chapter. Elliot tracked the remnants of Zona Valley Holdings to a trust owned by the developer's sister. She'd passed, but her estate had transferred the remaining property rights to her niece, Ruth Ellen Swinson, age 82, living in Tucson with a dog named Muffin, and zero idea she still held claim to a lake in Georgia. Elliot called her. She thought it was a scam. Then she found a manila envelope with the deed and said, "Well, I thought this place was underwater." We made her an offer, modest but fair, enough to cover her dental work, Muffin's next 5 groomings, and maybe a new patio set. She accepted. No fuss, no negotiation, just, glad it's going to someone who wants it. I said, "Ma'am, I don't just want it, I need it." Back home, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post receipts. I didn't even skip the next HOA meeting. I showed up in my same old fishing hat, nodded at Glenda, sipped the community punch, and listened as she laid down new kayak regulations and dock dress codes like she was chairing the UN. I smiled the whole time, because behind that smile was a secret, and behind that secret was a deed with my name on it. Elliot even joked this might be the first time someone bought a lake by accident. He wasn't wrong. The whole thing felt like finding a winning lottery ticket in your sock drawer. But luck wasn't the real engine here. It was watching a bunch of clipboard tyrants collapse under the weight of their own assumptions, and I wasn't about to interrupt that natural process. No, sir. I was going to let them keep handing out tickets, keep acting like they owned the tide, while I quietly walked around with the keys. I spent those days fishing with an extra sense of serenity. Every time my line hit the water, I thought about the moment Glenda would realize the water wasn't hers to guard. The signs she printed? Useless. The warnings taped to my door? Trash with extra tape. The HOA might have thought they were enforcing order, but what they really did was poke a quiet man with legal resources and a long fuse, and now that fuse was lit, burning quietly beneath the surface like a slow-motion fireworks show only I could see. By the end of the week, Elliot had the contract drawn up, signed, sealed, and waiting to be filed. Ruth Ellen even included a handwritten note. "Good luck with the lake. Hope your ducks behave." I laughed, framed the note, and kept fishing. Not to gloat, just to breathe. Because sometimes power isn't loud. Sometimes it's just sitting on a dock, holding a document no one else thought to ask for. The HOA thought they were playing Monopoly, tossing out fines like "do not pass go." But I wasn't playing their game. I was playing chess. And I had just moved my queen across the board while everyone else was arguing about who left their canoe unlocked. I didn't need a speech. I had the deed. And the best part? I hadn't even shown it to them yet. Because sometimes the greatest move isn't checkmate, it's letting your opponent play one more turn before they realize the board was yours the whole time. Stick around. The next part? That's when I let her see it. And oh, it's glorious. So now I had the deed, the leverage, and a poker face sharper than Glenda's haircut. But I wasn't going to drop the bomb just yet. No. I wanted them to keep dancing, keep thinking they ran the lake, while I quietly owned every ripple. What happened next? Let's just say the signs were coming. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because in the next part I plant the first flag and the HOA, they go full meltdown mode. You won't believe how fast a golf cart can reverse when the paperwork's real. Stick around. It's about to get personal. There's a special kind of satisfaction in knowing something everyone else doesn't. Not smug, not mean, just quiet power, like walking into a poker game with all 4 aces already tucked in your hand while the table argues about house rules. That's how I felt every time I sat at those HOA meetings after the deed was mine. Glenda would be up there rattling off new rules. No fishing past 6 p.m., no paddle boards wider than 30 inches, and, I kid you not, a mandatory footwear policy for anyone using the dock. Flip-flops were apparently a liability. I just sipped my punch and nodded like a good little citizen, because she didn't know. Not yet. Meanwhile, I kept fishing. Same dock, same coffee, same frog with a crooked hop watching from the reeds. Every so often a neighbor would pass by and ask if I was worried about the citations. Nah, I'd say, some things just sort themselves out. That's the kind of patience HOA types don't recognize. They mistake silence for surrender. But sometimes silence is just the sound of a storm charging up behind the clouds, and mine was building. Glenda, bless her brittle nerves, was really starting to believe she'd won. She rolled by my cabin more often now, slow, smug laps in her golf cart with her laminated rule book like it was a badge. One day, she waved at me like we were old friends. I waved back with my coffee cup. She had no idea she was trespassing on land she didn't own. That's the best part about a well-played plan. It doesn't need a microphone, it just needs time. At the next board meeting, she doubled down, introduced a motion to install dock monitors, volunteers who'd log access hours, enforce flotation device inspections, and issue community warnings for unsanctioned aquatic activity. One of the board members asked, "Do we even have the authority for that?" Glenda shot him a glare so sharp it could have trimmed hedges. "We make the authority," she snapped, and that's when I knew she wasn't just power-hungry. She was starving. So I called a sign company from the next town over, folks who wouldn't recognize Glenda or her squad of suburban security scouts. I ordered 12 large, hand-carved wooden signs. Rustic, elegant, but unmistakable. Each one would read, "Private property, no trespassing, residents not welcome, violators will be prosecuted." And I made sure the wood was stained darker than Glenda's spray tan and bold enough to be seen from a paddle boat. The lake had been quiet long enough it was almost time to speak, but not just yet. I didn't rush it. timing mattered. You don't drop a flag during a parade. You wait until the drum line stops and everyone's holding their breath. That's when it lands the hardest. So I waited, kept going to meetings, kept nodding like a well-trained goldfish. All while Elliot finalized the paperwork and filed the deed at the county office. Quiet, methodical, surgical. It wasn't just about land. It was about message. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. You'd think someone like Glenda would sense when the ground starts shifting under their feet, but no. She strutted around like the queen of the cul-de-sac, handing out warnings like they were party favors. She introduced a color-coded kayak tagging system next. Red for even-numbered lots, blue for odd. One poor guy got written up for having a green sticker. I nearly lost it. But I bit my tongue and took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. Some moments deserve to age before you serve them. Even Elliot was impressed. Ben, he said, this is like watching a cat play chess. I said, not yet. I haven't made a move. Exactly, he said, and they're already sweating. Truth is, that's when power starts to shift. Not when someone gets loud, but when the person they're trying to bully just smiles and lets the silence do the lifting. That silence? It's like compound interest. Let it build and one day it buys you everything. The last straw came when Glenda installed a laminated sign, zip-tied of course, to a post near my dock. It read, "All fishing must cease by sunset. No bait containers on deck." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was mad, because I was amazed. She was regulating a piece of shoreline that, on paper, now legally belonged to me, every inch of it. It was like someone ticketing you for sneezing in your own house. That night, I took out the sign schematics and the deed, laid them out on the kitchen table, and lit a candle. Not out of drama, but because the bulb in that room had gone out and I didn't feel like fixing it. I reviewed everything one last time. The signs were done. The legal filings were recorded. The property lines were clear as a bell. I wasn't stepping over a line. I was planting a flag right in the middle of it. And I'll tell you right now, when those signs go up, they don't just block access. They send a message. A message louder than Glenda's megaphone HOA voice. Because while she was drawing lines in chalk, I was carving my name in oak. The difference between a ruler and a leader? A ruler draws lines. A leader reads the land first. Next morning, I called the installation crew and gave them the timeline. Sunrise, 12 signs, all around the lake. Strategic spots, near docks, trails, and the community kayak rack. Places that would get noticed before breakfast. I figured by 8 o'clock, the neighborhood group chat would look like it had been hit by a digital lightning bolt. And me? I planned to be on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the storm roll in like it was just another Tuesday. Because some fights are loud, and others are whispered in signatures, sealed in envelopes, and hung on cedar posts. That's how I planned it. That's how I wanted it. And what came next? Oh, they weren't ready. I wasn't doing this for applause. I wasn't doing it to humiliate anybody, not even Glenda. I was doing it because there comes a point where silence becomes complicity, and I'd stayed quiet long enough. This was about setting things straight, about letting the land speak for itself. And trust me, once those signs were up, the land was about to speak volumes. Don't go anywhere. You'll want to hear what it says next. The kind of message no newsletter can spin, no clipboard can erase. It was coming. Oak, iron, and truth. And once it landed, no one in that neighborhood would unsee it. Done. They say the pen is mightier than the sword, but let me tell you, 12 wooden signs freshly planted at sunrise do a lot more damage than a memo ever could. By 7:48 a.m., the first angry ping hit the neighborhood group chat, a photo of one of my signs. Private property, no trespassing, residents not welcome. Violators will be prosecuted. The caption, who did this? By 8:03, Glenda was tearing down the street in her golf cart, like Paul Revere if he'd traded his horse for HOA delusion. The signs had landed. And her crown? It was cracking. Stayed on my porch. coffee in hand, feet up, just watching it all unfold. The installation crew did beautiful work. Clean lines, deep stakes, perfect spacing. The lake looked like it had been claimed by a national park, only with more sass. I wasn't out to make enemies, but I also wasn't here to keep pretending. That water, that dock, that 10-foot buffer zone, all mine now. And Glenda was standing squarely in it, shrieking like someone stole her crown. The group chat turned into a digital bonfire, comments rolling in faster than you could scroll. Some furious, some confused, a few cheering quietly with emojis. Glenda tried to get ahead of it, posted, "This is unauthorized, these signs are not recognized by the HOA." Someone responded, "Are they legal though?" Then another, "Wait, didn't Dean own that land?" That's when the tide shifted, because suddenly questions started surfacing that Glenda wasn't ready to answer. But petty doesn't go down without a fight. Not 24 hours after the signs went up, I found the ropes on my canoe slashed clean through. Not frayed, not worn, cut, like someone wanted to send a message. The next morning, a smell hit me before I even opened the cabin door. Rotten eggs dumped right across my welcome mat. Not subtle, not creative, just messy, like a toddler trying to graffiti with applesauce. I cleaned it up, shook my head, and kept moving. You poke a bear, you better make sure it ain't holding a camera. 3 days later, I found sugar in the gas tank of my fishing boat. That wasn't just vandalism, that was sabotage. That could have blown the whole engine if I hadn't caught it in time. That's when I stopped playing nice. I installed 4 cameras, 2 around the dock, 1 facing the road, and 1 under the eave by the boathouse. Didn't post about it, didn't tell a soul. Let 'em keep coming. If Glenda's crew wanted to escalate, fine, I'd give them just enough rope to swing their own clipboards. Sure enough, 2 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2:14. AIM motion alert. I pulled up the feed. There he was. Mark, one of Glenda's loyal board buddies. Hoodie pulled tight, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. The man was tiptoeing like a cartoon burglar. He made it halfway down the dock before I hit the alarm from my phone. A piercing siren cut through the lake silence like a clarinet at a funeral. Mark jumped, dropped the cutters, and bolted, slipped on the rocks, limped all the way back to the trail like he'd just lost a battle with gravity and shame. By noon the next day, the sheriff's deputy had seen the footage. By 5, Mark had a misdemeanor citation in his mailbox and 1 very awkward HOA meeting to attend. I wasn't done, though. I printed still frames from the footage, clear as daylight, and hand-delivered them to every mailbox in the community. On the back, a simple message. Private property means private rules. Respect the line or pay the fine. That flyer hit harder than the signs. People started whispering, not about me, about her. Glenda tried to spin it. Mark was inspecting dock safety, but the damage was done. You can't walk back from bolt cutters at 2 a.m. The HOA board? They started splintering. Some backed away quietly. One even emailed me to apologize, said they didn't sign up for sabotage. And then came the meltdown. The emergency HOA meeting Glenda called wasn't really a meeting, it was a performance. She slammed her gavel, declared the neighborhood was under siege, and called my signs an invasion of our lifestyle. Her voice cracked when she said it. One board member tried to ask a question, she overruled it. Another brought up the deed. I thought she'd throw her clipboard. It was chaos and khakis. She ruled through HOA codes like they were commandments. Problem was, Moses actually checked the stone tablets first. Glenda never did. She built her little empire on assumptions and laminated notices. But now the land was speaking for itself. And that land? It wasn't taking orders anymore. By the end of that week, 3 of her board members resigned. One cited a difference in legal philosophy, which I think is HOA speak for, "I'm not going to court for your ego." Glenda doubled down, of course. Tried to organize a neighborhood march, made flyers with phrases like "reclaim our lake" and "down with land hoarders." I framed one, not out of spite, out of amusement. But she still had loyalists. That's the thing about people who need control. They cling to each other like wet socks. A small crew followed her around, handing out poorly printed newsletters full of emotional appeals and fake legal theories. I didn't engage. I didn't post. I just sat on my porch, sipped my coffee, and watched. That weekend, I added a new sign to the dock. This one was smaller but sharper. Right under the bold private property letters, I had etched the phrase, "Footage in use, prosecution in progress." I watched folks read it from the walking path, pause, and keep moving without a word. The HOA grapevine must be working overtime, because I started getting polite waves from people who wouldn't even make eye contact a week earlier. Amazing what legal clarity can do for your popularity. Mark? He went radio silent. Rumor was he blamed Glenda for putting him in a bad position. Glenda, naturally, threw him under the bus faster than a broken lawn flamingo, claimed she never authorized any inspection, said it was all a misunderstanding. But the board wasn't buying it. The sabotage, the flyers, the arrest, they all pointed back to a pattern. And patterns, once you see them, are hard to unsee. That's when I knew this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about culture. The HOA had ruled through fear, fines, and passive-aggressive signage for years. Now they were facing someone who didn't flinch, didn't yell, and didn't back down. I wasn't throwing punches. I was flipping the script, one oak sign at a time. And what happens when a silent man finally speaks through the law, the land, and the facts? The next part, where it gets real, because next, I make the lake official. Club name, gate, membership, rules. Oh, and one beautifully brutal exclusion. You don't want to miss that reveal. There's petty and then there's poetic. What I did next, that was poetry with a business license. The day I officially filed the paperwork to create Lake Providence Private Club, I didn't just check a box. I planted a flag. The name wasn't an accident. Providence means protection. It means vision. It means no more clipboard crusaders running shoreline inspections like they're the Coast Guard. The new signs went up that morning. Oak boards, brass trim, laser-etched letters. Lake Providence Private Club, members only, residents not welcome. Violators will be prosecuted. I put one right where the HOA used to hang their rules, like replacing graffiti with scripture. It didn't take long for the neighborhood chat to explode. Glenda melted down faster than butter on asphalt. But this time something changed. Her loyalists were asking questions. Is this even illegal? One typed. Another, didn't Dean buy the lake? When even the clipboard cult starts doubting the queen, you know the tides are turning. I was at the lodge restocking bait when I heard Glenda storming up in her visor and rage. Hal, my retired Coast Guard gate guard, and Mia, our college volunteer turned security wall, stood calmly as she shouted that I was violating her rights. "You're discriminating," she yelled. I smiled and pointed at the laminated membership policy. Private club, just like your pool, Glenda, you remember? Back when you banned me for having the wrong shoes. She knocked over a brochure rack on the way out, twisted her sandal heel, and limped off like a Disney villain, missing the musical number. But I knew this wasn't over. She'd go underground, rallying outrage like it was a coupon drive. So I stayed 3 moves ahead. Then came Reggie Bowman, the new HOA president. No tantrum, just a handshake and a bottle of water. "We backed the wrong horse," he said. "Any chance of a once-a-year community day?" I didn't answer right away. Old me would have shut the door on that idea. But I'd seen the good neighbors. Folks who just wanted peace. I nodded. Let's see how the summer goes. And it did go. We held our first Veterans BBQ and paddle bat, 200 people. Kayak races, live music, a raffle for a firefighter family. That lake came alive. Local news ran a segment. Veteran saves lake from HOA builds a club without bullies. I framed it. Right next to Glenda's original $600 0-cent citation, tourists took selfies with it. Even kids pointed and laughed. She's the lady who banned frogs. Membership soared. Teachers, veterans, first responders, folks who'd been fined for bird feeders and lawn chairs. Lake Providence turned into something bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just private, it was principled. Glenda tried to claw her way back with a Facebook group called Restore Resident Access, 17 exclamation points. One post accused me of profiting off exclusion. I printed it and taped it next to our free fishing pass sign for veteran, irony framed and centered. Meanwhile, her audience thinned. Her old crew had moved on. Her voice echoes in an empty clubhouse. We added a canoe rack, a pollinator garden, even a bell under the lodge porch Hal brought from his service days. Order without yelling, he called it. Beautiful. She built fences with red tape. I rebuilt the shoreline with invitation and intention. And that's the difference. My rules earned respect. Hers demanded it. But just as things seemed to settle, another invitation arrived, this time from the town. A booth, a public event, a crowd. And I had no idea who would show up. Until I saw her. Don't blink. The final showdown's coming. And you won't believe what she does next. Some stories end with a bang. Mine, it ended with a board. Oak, of course, consistent with the theme. But this one wasn't just for the HOA, it was for me. A final piece of punctuation in a sentence I'd been writing since the day they fined me for a canoe and a pair of muddy boots. The sign went up on a Saturday morning, 2 screws and a level. It faced the public trail bold as daylight. Enjoy the view from afar, and below that, in smaller print, membership required, patience rewarded. People took pictures. Someone made it into a bumper sticker. Another turned it into a coffee mug. I ordered 2 myself. The message hit harder than I expected. Not because it was mean, but because it was accurate. The lake didn't just change hands, it changed hearts. And like any good current, it pulled petty power out to sea. Then came the town showcase. Community booths, pie contests, garden hats, the whole Americana starter pack. I set up a modest Lake Providence table, simple banner, a few flyers, some homemade jerky in mason jars. Glenda set up across the field with a brand new tent labeled Lakewide Harmony Coalition. Subtle as ever. Her table had binders, stickers, and a petition. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. You can smell desperation the same way you smell burning toast, no matter how nice the kitchen looks. She tried one last power play, waited until the mayor passed by our booths and loudly asked, "Can we really allow public land to be restricted like this?" The mayor, bless him, raised an eyebrow, looked at my deed copy hanging on the signpost, and said, "That's private land, Glenda, always has been." Then he took a piece of jerky and moved on. I swear you could hear the air go out of her tent like someone popped a beach ball in church. By noon, kids were lined up at our paddle race sign-up sheet, parents asking about memberships, and 3 different folks brought me homemade pies, just in case we win next year. Glenda's table? Crickets. Even the flies didn't look interested. I didn't gloat. I just smiled, refilled the jerky jars, and reminded Mia to thank every visitor. That's the thing about revenge. It's loud. But resolution? That's quiet, steady, and built like a dock that won't drift. By mid-afternoon, the judges made their rounds. Our booth won 2nd place, beat by a cobbler's stand, and I was thrilled. Glenda left early, packed her tent like it owed her rent. No eye contact, no clipboard, just the sound of Velcro and defeat. I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. It wasn't about crushing anyone. It was about proving something without raising your voice. All along, she thought power came from authority. Turns out, it comes from ownership, and the kind of patience that doesn't snap when provoked, but plans. Just before we packed up, a kid, maybe 7 years old, wandered over, holding a half-eaten funnel cake and staring at the lake banner behind me. He squinted up and asked, "You really own the whole lake?" I chuckled. "Yep, bought peas by the acre." He grinned, sticky fingers and all, and said, "Cool," like I'd just told him I owned a spaceship. And that was it. The mic drop. Not from me, from the moment. That kind of truth doesn't need a speech. The next week, I had a bench installed under the final sign. Cedar and steel. Nothing fancy. People started sitting there. Teenagers, veterans, newlyweds. It was like the lake had taken a breath. No noise, no laminated rules, just nature, peace, and a little reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come in a robe. It comes with a power drill and a little patience. I think about that lake now the way you think about a good old friend. It's not just water and trees. It's memory. It's every Saturday morning when I heard birds instead of blowhards. It's every smile from a neighbor who no longer feared fines for planting tomatoes. That's what we saved. Not just a place, but a rhythm, a way of life. HOA culture tried to micromanage joy. We just made space for it to grow. I didn't keep that sign up for her. I kept it for me, as a reminder that standing your ground doesn't always mean pushing back. Sometimes it means building forward. With oak. With grit. With people who know the difference between power and purpose. So yeah, a pie booth beat me at the town fair, but I'll take second place every day if the first prize is peace. And as for Glenda, let's just say she's been real quiet lately, which is funny because that's the one rule she never made. And if you've made it this far through signs, sabotage, silence, and a whole lot of HOA ridiculousness, then maybe you see what I see. This was never just about a lake. It was about dignity, about pushing back on the quiet bullying that hides behind bylaws, about what happens when one person, armed with patience, wit, and a deed, decides to rewrite the rules without throwing a single punch. The lesson? You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a crowd to start change, and you sure don't need permission to protect peace. Ben didn't just win back a shoreline, he gave his neighbors a new way to stand up without shouting. If you felt that, if this story hit home or hit funny, then go ahead and like what this story stands for. Leave a comment, let us know where you're watching from, and tell us your own HOA horror or victory. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next twist, the next poetic clapback, or the next neighbor who dares to say, "You don't own me, I read the deed."